Fatu, a woman with a weathered face and worn-out plastic sandals, clutched a fabric bag tightly in her arms. Inside were documents she had carried from the village of Ndiaya, after more than 3 hours on a bus. She stood in front of Sahel International Bank, hesitated for a moment, then stepped inside. The air inside the bank was cool, filled with the scent of expensive perfume and the soft sound of Western lounge music. Fatu blinked a few times to adjust to the lighting. She walked up to the reception desk and gently said, "Good morning. I have an appointment with the partnerships department. My name is Fatu Diagne." The young receptionist, dressed in a crisp uniform and deep red lipstick, scanned her from head to toe, her eyes briefly pausing on the cloth head wrap and worn-out sandals before frowning. "Do you really have an appointment? With whom? We don't receive ordinary citizens without an introduction letter. I have a confirmation email." Fatu opened her bag and pulled out a clear printout with the name of the contact person and the scheduled time. But the receptionist didn't bother to look. She dialed an internal line, whispered something, then turned back with a mocking smile. "Sorry, but the department you're looking for isn't available today. Please leave." Fatu kept her voice calm. "Could you please check again? I just need 5 minutes." At that moment, a man in a dark blue suit stepped forward. It was Thierry, the operations manager of the lobby. When he saw Fatu, he paused for a second, then turned to the receptionist. "What's going on? This woman says she has an appointment with the partnerships department, but doesn't have the proper paperwork." Thierry nodded and turned to Fatu. "Ma'am, we expect our visitors to be dressed appropriately and follow protocol. If you don't have a guest pass or a letter of introduction, please step outside." Fatu's expression remained unchanged. She slightly bowed her head and spoke softly but firmly. "You don't need to worry. I'll be back. But remember this, don't be too quick to close the door on the one holding the key." Then she turned and walked out, leaving behind faint chuckles from a group of nearby employees. No one noticed that, in a far corner, a young man had recorded the entire scene on his phone. He muttered, "This can't be left to pass." Just a few hours after Fatu left the Sahel International Bank, a video less than 2 minutes long began to spread rapidly across social media. The person who posted it was Malik, a communications student who happened to witness the entire scene from the waiting area. He had only intended to record a moment to highlight the unjust treatment of the poor by financial institutions, but he never expected the video to go viral like this. In the clip, Fatu stands calm, polite yet firm, being turned away simply because she didn't appear affluent. Her final words, "Don't be too quick to close the door on the one holding the key," acted like a spark that ignited public curiosity and outrage. Comments poured in. "Who is she to say something like that with such confidence? So now the poor aren't entitled to respect? A Sahel bank better get ready to issue a public apology." Some people began digging for information about Fatu. Her presence online was virtually non-existent. No personal photos, no public profile, which only fueled the speculation. Maybe she's not just an ordinary woman? Major influencers in Senegal, such as journalist Demba Gueye, lawyer Aminata Fall, and even the famous TV host Boubacar, shared the video with a powerful message: "Stop judging people by the shoes they wear." The national TV station aired the story during its evening broadcast, with a bold headline, "Sahel International Bank accused of discriminating against civilian clients, a mysterious woman forces the system to rethink." At the bank's headquarters, operations manager Thierry began to feel the rising tide. His phone rang non-stop with calls from the communications department, the branch director, and even the main headquarters in Abidjan. "Who exactly did you throw out of the lobby, Thierry? Do you have any idea who she is?" The voice of the regional director was sharp and deliberate during a 4 p.m. call. Thierry stuttered. Just a woman in poor clothing. No invitation. Looked like someone from the countryside. You just described the potential strategic partner we've been trying to sign a deal with for the past 3 months. The voice on the other end thundered, leaving Thierry speechless. At exactly 4:40 p.m., just as staff were getting ready to leave for the day, an internal message rang through the system. All managerial staff, report to the conference room on the 12th floor. Emergency meeting. Thierry stepped into the elevator, his heart racing, with only one line echoing in his mind. Don't be too quick to close the door on the one holding the key. At 5:03 p.m., as the Dakar sky turned a deep golden hue, a motorcade appeared in front of Sahel International Bank, stunning the entire street. A black, armored Mercedes SUV rolled to a slow stop. The door swung open, and Fatu stepped out. But this time, she was no longer in a faded old dress. She wore a luxurious indigo boubou, her wrist adorned with a silver bracelet engraved, F. Diagne. Her face was calm, her gaze sharp and resolute. Behind her were 2 legal representatives in dark suits, accompanied by a white man, a delegate from the Pan-African Capital Financial Group. The security guards, the same ones who had escorted her out that morning, now bowed awkwardly. Fatu said nothing. She walked gracefully into the lobby. The young receptionist stood frozen, mouth agape. Thierry, just stepping out of the elevator, halted as if he had slammed into an invisible wall. I'm so sorry, madam, Thierry stammered, his face pale. Fatu turned to him, looking him directly in the eye for the first time. Calm, yet icy. You still don't know who I am, do you, Mr. Thierry? Thierry swallowed hard, his eyes darting for help. A man in a silk shirt, wearing a regional director badge, Abdoulaye Diop, emerged from the private elevator, rushing over to shake Fatu's hand. Ms. Fatu, we deeply apologize for what happened this morning. It is an honor to welcome you to our headquarters. Fatu nodded politely, her gaze still fixed on Thierry. She turned to the lawyer beside her. Show them the shareholder confirmation. The lawyer pulled out a thick folder and placed it on the counter. The cover page read, Fatu Diagne, principal shareholder, controlling 62% of Sahel Bank's capital via Baobab Vision Capital. The entire lobby fell silent. Fatu turned, her voice clear and unwavering. No need to raise it. I came here this morning as a partner, but I was denied entry because of the sandals I wore. She walked slowly to the center of the lobby, each step pressing down on the false pride of those who judged by appearances. She stopped, surveying the room. This bank doesn't just owe me an apology. It owes every poor person, everyone who's ever been turned away for how they look, a fair correction. Abdoulaye bowed his head. We are ready to listen and change. Fatu glanced at the chair where Thierry had stood that morning. The first step is to change the one sitting in that seat. Thierry stood motionless, his face as white as paper. No one objected. Fatu walked toward the private elevator, needing no guide. As the doors closed, they reflected the image of the woman once cast aside, now rising to the highest floor of power. 21st floor, the main boardroom of Sahel International Bank. A space typically reserved for high-level strategic meetings, reserved for board members, shareholders, and regional power players. Today, the central chair, the seat of authority, was offered to a woman, Fatu Diagne. She sat upright, hands loosely clasped on the table. Her face was calm, without arrogance, yet it held none of the humility from that morning. Across from her sat 12 members of the bank's executive board, including Abdoulaye Diop. Ladies and gentlemen, Fatu began, her voice as clear as blades cutting through dense fog. I did not come here to flaunt power. I came to ask you a simple question. Is this bank still worthy of serving the people of Senegal, or has it become a fortress for those allowed to wear suits and foreign cologne? Silence. Fatu glanced at the screen and gave a small signal to the technician. One by one, data slides appeared. A Baobab Vision Capital, a micro-investment fund operating in 14 African countries, founded by Fatu Diagne. 62% of Sahel International Bank shares are now controlled by Baobab Vision. Fatu Diagne, former student at Cheikh Anta Diop University, raised in the village of Ndiaya, once lived off the vegetables her mother sold at the market. The room held its breath. A gray-bearded board member finally asked, "Ms. Fatu, why hide your identity? Why allow yourself to be thrown out like a nobody?" Fatu's gaze softened. "Because I needed to see the truth. I've traveled this country, seen people from Madam, Ziguinchor, Kaolack denied loans simply because they didn't have an email address or couldn't wear leather shoes. I wanted to know, if I walked in here wearing the same sandals, what would happen?" She paused. "And what happened was I was asked to leave." Abdoulaye lowered his head, his voice somber. "We have failed our mission." Fatu nodded. "But we can still make it right. I didn't come to tear down, I came to rebuild." She opened her case and pulled out a thick set of documents. "I'm presenting a reform proposal, divided into 3 parts. 1. Mandatory unconscious bias training. 2. Lending targets for underdeveloped regions. 3. Creation of a community access unit, led by someone with lived experience." Another board member spoke up. "And if the board doesn't approve, Ms. Fatu?" Fatu looked directly at him. "Then as the controlling shareholder, I will take it to the General Assembly and show this bank that the trust of the people is worth more than any balance sheet." Silence lingered for nearly a minute. Then, one by one, the members began to nod. "Ms. Fatu, I support this. The proposal is approved." "Fully agreed." Fatu smiled, gently, like the breeze before a harvest. The political and financial battlefield, once cold and rigid, had begun to shift, moved by the woman who was once dismissed for wearing plastic sandals. 2 days after the historic meeting on the 21st floor, an internal hearing was held in the largest conference hall of Sahel International Bank. For the first time in the bank's history, every employee, from security guards and receptionists to department directors, was invited to attend a session of transparency and accountability, chaired by the bank's largest shareholder, Fatu Diagne. The room was packed. Cold white lights cast a stark glow on anxious faces. In the front row, Thierry sat still, his suit rumpled, his eyes distant and dazed. Fatu stepped onto the stage, holding a wireless microphone. Without introduction, she began with a question. "How many of you here have ever been disrespected because of how you look or where you come from?" Silence. Fatu nodded, then continued. "And how many of you have ever been the one showing that disrespect?" There was the sound of shifting chairs. Some eyes lowered. "We are not here to assign blame," Fatu said. "But we must face the truth. The truth is that Sahel International Bank has unknowingly built invisible walls that shut millions out of the doors of finance." She turned to Thierry. "Mr. Thierry, do you remember what you said to me that morning?" Thierry hesitated. I was just following protocol. And I didn't know who you were." Fatu smiled, not with reproach, but with clarity. "And that's the most frightening part. Not that you didn't know who I was, but that you didn't care to know that I was human." She turned back to the crowd. "We can train employees to handle transactions. But respect cannot be programmed through checklists. It must be lived, learned from experience, and led by the heart." Fatu then presented her reform plan. "See the Real People training program. Each employee will spend at least 1 day per quarter in underserved areas, listening to first-hand stories of banking challenges. Creation of a community access division, led by someone who has personally experienced poverty. Lending targets for low-income populations, shifting the focus away from purely commercial profit. Pilot everyday customer counters, where clients can receive services without needing to dress in corporate attire. Unexpectedly, an elderly woman in a janitor's uniform stood up. Her name was Fatu, a long-time cleaning staff member. Ms. Fatu, I never imagined a day I'd be invited to a meeting like this. I was once turned away from a customer counter, just for wearing my uniform. But today, I feel seen. The room erupted in applause. Fatu stepped down and walked toward Fatu. Starting next week, you will lead our community monitoring office, with the authority to assess friendliness at every branch. Those who know the pain of rejection know best how to welcome others with their hearts. In a quiet corner, Cherry lowered his head and quietly left his seat. He knew he no longer belonged on the path this bank was taking. Fatu looked up, her gaze unwavering. We may not be able to change the entire world. But if this bank opens just one more door, for one more poor person to walk through, then that is how we make the world better. 2 months after the upheaval at headquarters, Sahel International Bank had taken on a new face. Not just a new plaque with the added slogan, "The People's Bank," but a new atmosphere, where every greeting, every glance, every procedure now carried something deeper: kindness. In a small village in the Kaolack region, a yellow truck pulled into the red dirt town square. On its side was the Sahel Bank logo, and below it, bold letters read, "Mobile Branch, no one left behind." The truck doors opened, and Fatu stepped out. Gone was the corporate attire. She wore a simple cotton dress and a traditional headscarf. Children cheered and ran toward her. Adults bowed their heads, their eyes warm with affection. Behind her was Fatu, now National Community Engagement Supervisor, accompanied by 2 young bank employees. They set up a booth, opened their ledgers, and began the day's first services. Opening savings accounts for vegetable sellers, approving loans for women raising goats, helping young villagers build credit profiles without needing city ID cards. In Dakar, the bank's central branches now featured a small desk labeled, "Ask, we will listen." Beside it was a photo of Fatu, with her quote, "Respect doesn't require wealth. It requires being seen as human." One afternoon, Fatu sat on the porch of her childhood home in the village of Ndiaya. Her mother, Aminata, was rinsing rice by the hearth. The wind carried scents of earth, roasted corn, and the laughter of children. "I never imagined my daughter would grow up to be someone like this," her mother said, stirring the pot. Fatu smiled, her eyes gentle. "Neither did I, Mama. I just wore old sandals. And somehow, the world listened." Somewhere in the city, a new manager welcomed a modestly dressed visitor with a sincere smile. No one was turned away for a worn-out scarf or a thick rural accent. No door was closed because of prejudice. And on the top floor of the bank's headquarters, the main boardroom now bore a new name, the Fatu Diagon Room. Not to honor a wealthy woman, but to remind everyone. A door to finance only matters if it no longer closes on anyone. The world doesn't change because of the suits people wear or the sandals on their feet. It changes because of the hearts that dare to rise after being overlooked, and that dare to open paths for those left behind. Fatu didn't just walk through the door. She changed the way that door is opened. If this story touched you, please like, share, and subscribe to help spread more stories about doors that no longer stay shut. And don't forget to comment your thoughts on this story.